there batteries in there? Green light. Alright, what are we doing? Worship was coming through beautifully. Da-da-da-da. Oh! Oh my gosh. Guys, I don't think I've ever said anything more profound than what I was just saying. I think, for those of you watching online, I think you need to just go back when this is over and rewatch that whole segment again. No, to clarify, we had a little bit of technical difficulty on the microphone. So, hit our rewind button. How many of you think you could write your own biography? Some of you could. Okay. And some of you don't think you could. What would get in the way of you writing your own biography? I said, I don't pay attention to my life. The same thing happened for me. I've thought about that because I'm like, dang, people got biographies. In fact, I have a couple right here. And this is, oh, wow, that was loud. The biography of Kofi Annan. This is a pretty hefty book. It's a quality book, quality read. But here's a biography right here of a man. This right here, this is Bonhoeffer. Everyone should read this right here. Great biography of a Christian pastor, martyr. It says pastor, martyr, prophet, spy. He was a follower of Jesus in Germany during the rise of the Nazis. And wow, what a man, what a theologian. That's a book though, right? Like that's a book. This is a famous, The Team of Rivals is a biography about Abraham Lincoln. That's Abraham Lincoln right there. And in case you've never seen him, you can also look at a penny. Good guy. Here's the thing. Abraham Lincoln did a lot. Why did he get a penny? He's on the penny. It's true. I think it was like, dude, helped abolish slavery, Civil War, got an awesome beard and a cool hat. We're going to give you a penny. Huh? He's on the 5. Oh, okay. So wait, does he have 2 or is he not on the penny and I'm wrong? He's on 2. Okay, respect. He got his kudos. So there's that. That's a big book. Here are 2 biographies about the same guy. So here's a biography, and here's another one. Same guy, different books. In fact, in this book, they spent 16 pages referencing all the other biographies about this guy. Like it just said, and then this person wrote this biography about him, and then this person in this year wrote this biography. So I'm like, this dude has 16 pages worth of biographies. And I've thought about that. I'm like, are you supposed to write an autobiography by the end of your life? I don't know. But then I had the same problem as some of you. I'm like, I don't think I could, because I wasn't paying attention. I don't even remember stuff that happened. Like, I don't know how I would write my own biography or my own story because I was just doing it. I was just living it. And I look back and I forget. I forget memories all the time until like someone else tells a story and they go, oh yeah, that same thing happened to me. And then I tell a story. We were just doing that earlier today about leaving seafood in a car or a room for too long. It's not good. It's not good. So I was thinking about this, but biographies, one of the cool things, this biography that I actually just read is about really, what some may say, the first missionary from America to the world, to Burma. But they were a lot. What surprised me about this book and the other biography about him is so much of the story that's written is written through the letters that he wrote, the letters that he sent out, the time he took reflecting on the things that were happening in his life and going on in Burma and taking place around him and craziness. He got married, his wife died, and then his 2-year-old died, and then he got tortured, and then his dad died, and then his brother died, and then he got married a second time, and then his second wife died, and then he got married a third time, and then he died. It was rough. It was rough. But they took his letters, and they took his own literature, and they used that as the means to write his story and write his biography. And like some of you have said, man, do you take time to even think about your own life and to think about what's happened, to think about what you've been through, where you've come from? Like I think back and I remember like last week, but do I even remember things from last year? Do I remember things from 2 years ago, 5 years ago? It starts getting really blurry. And if you watched our video on spiritual disciplines, which was really long, one of the disciplines I talked about was journaling. And I've made that a habit, and it's been really cool how I've been able to look back on things from days and years prior, and I remember things that I never would have remembered before. But I wanted to take some time today to do a little bit of an exercise. I want to look at the spiritual discipline of reflection. Spiritual discipline of reflection, and I kind of want to guide us through a process of doing that a little bit. The reason being is 2020 has been a ride, right? It's been interesting. None of us would have predicted it'd be like this. I mean, COVID-19, murder hornets, the current news, it's just the world is crazy oftentimes. Sometimes it seems out of control, and I just know God is sovereign. I know that He's in control. I know nothing catches Him off guard or by surprise. I know He works all things for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purposes. I know that He is working in our lives, and I know He works in every situation and circumstance, not to cultivate our happiness necessarily. That's not God's desire. His desire is to cultivate people who look like His Son. People who are shaped and conformed and molded to the image of Christ. God's ultimate desire for you is that by the end of this life, as you move into eternity, you would be sanctified. You would be made to look like Jesus. See, in the beginning, there was man and woman, and we were made in the image of God. A word used is icons. We were icons. We were mere images. When you would look at humanity, when you look at people, you would see the character, nature, and who God was by looking at humanity. That's what we were crafted to be and to do. And then there was a fall, and the icons that we are, well, some cracks began to form, right? And now we don't quite represent Christ perfectly. We still represent aspects of His character and His nature, but we've fallen from that image in a sense. And Jesus restores us back into relationship with God, the Father, and then through Him, we are made to be the image of God once again, to be glorious and to glorify God well to all of creation and for all of eternity. God wants you to look like His Son. It's what you were made to be. It's who you are, and He's restoring that image in you for the rest of your life. And one of the great things, the hopes of eternity, is when we get to heaven, we will see God face to face, and we will be restored, and we will be made like Him, and all will be made well, and I'm excited for that day. But right now on this earth, as you stand, as you sit, as you go about your day, each and every detail of your day is working towards that goal. That's the goal. And I mentioned happiness a little bit because the American dream, the pursuit of happiness, a lot of times we think that's the goal, and anything that gets in the way of happiness, well, that's not even purposeful. That has no value or no worth. But if Jesus was a man of sorrows, if He was a suffering servant, God used suffering and pain and challenges and difficult seasons and difficult moments to work out His purpose in Jesus. Do you think He might do the same thing in us? Hopefully it's a yes. So, 2020 has been a ride. I want you to think back for a minute to when this all began. It's 2020, mid-March. You're told school's out for the week. And your first thought, heck yeah, 2-week spring break. Some thought it. You didn't at all. You were hecka mad. Some thought, I get a 2-week-long spring break. Some thought, I've been praying I wouldn't be in class. Others, maybe you missed your friends. But what were you feeling in that moment? It started, all right, a week off, we have spring break, and then no, we're not coming back. And then when are we? Maybe it's in April, maybe it's on the other side, and it just kept extending, right? And the situation continued to grow, and again, I know none of us expected us to be where we are. So I think God has used this season, I've talked about it a couple times, to produce things within us and in this world that wouldn't take place otherwise. God uses all things for his purposes. The other thing I know is that just our human tendency is we tend to just keep moving and keep going, and we don't oftentimes pause to think about what that might be. You hear what I'm saying? Like, do you pause and stop? When's the last time you just paused and you reflected? You just thought back on your life, thought back on who you are, where you've come from, who you're becoming, what God is doing, how he's working, what's going on in the world, what's been taking place. How many times have you stopped to just reflect on that and come out of it on the other side with something you wouldn't otherwise have? That's kind of what I want us to exercise today. So it's the spiritual discipline of reflection, because if we don't pause and we don't stop, we don't take time to reflect, we miss a lot of what God wants to do within us. So one of the reasons we talk about solitude and silence and slowing down is, are you pausing enough to take notice? Make sense? Verbal feedback? Anything? Or are we just pondering? Cool. So, here's kind of what I want to do. Again, like I said, not traditional. I just want to take some time right now, and then we'll discuss on the other side of this. But you have pens and paper under your seats if you're here in person, if you're in the upstairs room. If you're watching online, maybe get a pen and paper and get ready to maybe write some things down. Now, the art of reflection, like I said, is the art of looking back. It's pondering. So one thing I do, there's an art of daily reflection. Let me get these massive biographies out of here. The art of daily reflection is really cool. This is my 5-year journal. This is what I do every single night. I take time to do a quick once-over of my day. I'm going to reflect on my day, think about everything that happened, the encounters I had with other people, what activities I participated in for the day. What were my thoughts? What were my feelings? What were your motives for the day? Were your motives good? Were there selfish motives? Was anything skewed or off track of what it should be? Right? I just take time to reflect. What did you do right for the day? What things did you do that were God honoring? Where maybe could you have done better? Where did you fall short? Maybe it's in the way you spoke to someone. It's in a motive you expressed or something you participated in. You fell short of who you know you're called to be, and where could you have done better? What were your motives for the day? I said that. Were they self-seeking? Were they just completely God-honoring and glorifying in every way for the entirety of the day? These questions are questions that are designed to help you take a step back. So you don't just do your day, go to bed, wake up, and do it again. We're taking some time to reflect. And in that reflection, we're giving space for God through his Holy Spirit to speak to us, to nudge us, to direct us right into his righteous path. So when I know, man, there's an area where I fell short, then I know in that moment, okay, I want to ask for forgiveness of that. I want to repent of that. I want to pray that God would help me to grow out of that and to grow more like him. And through that practice of reflection at the end of every single day, we're allowing God to speak into the silence and to shape us and to morph us more and more like him. So areas of your life, you'll notice areas of your life that need attention, unproductive habits. These are areas that you can bring to God. Then there's weekly reflection. So a weekly reflection would maybe be looking back on the last 7 days and saying, okay, how did that go? What did that look like? Was this a productive week, a beneficial week? Was it kind of not so good, not very healthy? Why? In what ways? Right? What maybe habits or thought patterns, good or bad, persisted for more than a couple of days? Right? Maybe you notice over the course of a week, man, I kind of had an attitude or a perspective that wasn't helpful or beneficial. It was more than just a day or a moment when I was in a difficult situation. It kind of manifested into who I was for the week. I hope you're starting to see the benefits of like a weekly reflection. And then I would something that I try to do is what I maybe would call a seasonal reflection. So in a seasonal reflection, what I'm going to do, we talked about books. If you like books, you know books are oftentimes broken down into different chapters. And these chapters are like mini stories in and of themselves, progressing the story along, but at the end of a chapter, we begin kind of a new segment, a new adventure, a new season. Maybe in the story, in a novel, it shifts from one house to another town, right? The story jumps around. In our lives, there are seasons. And I think that right now we are kind of turning the page on another season, right? We are in person for the first time in like 13 weeks. We are in phase 2 for Oregon. We're kind of coming into something else. We've been doing small groups and squads in homes for a little bit, right? We're shifting into something new. And I don't want us to miss what God wanted to do in this last season, what he was working by just moving too fast into this next one. So we're going to take a moment, and I'm just going to give you some time to reflect. And there's going to be some questions that are up here, but I just want to spark some thoughts for you. So what have you learned, before you're reading them necessarily, but what have you learned through this season? What has God shown you? What has he revealed to you? Maybe about your social needs, maybe about things like what can happen through digital? What have we learned that social media can accomplish through things like Zoom calls and different chat platforms? But what have we learned? What have you learned in your life that, man, it really only happens in person? Where has there been a benefit from the solitude and the silence, that God has used that in your life to cultivate something good? Maybe what ways has it been detrimental? What ways have you noticed challenges that have emerged from being isolated from other people? You know, in this season, were there any subtle sins or patterns or thought patterns that began to bubble to the surface, right? Because you were on your own, you were no longer constantly moving and around people. Alone to your own thoughts, some things began to emerge in your mind that you weren't really aware of before. Is there anything that just blew up in this season? I'm thinking about insecurities, anxieties, your inability to be alone, anything that blew up in relationships with maybe siblings or with parents, right? This extra time, you notice things that were beginning to manifest in this space. I want us to just take an inventory. The good, the bad, the ugly, the lessons, the challenges, observations, just observations. What have you noticed? What have you noticed in your own heart, in your own life? What have you noticed in our culture, in the world around us? And I'm going to give us like at least 5 minutes to just reflect. All right? And then I'll come back up, and maybe a little longer. But then I want to kind of just dialogue about this, and maybe together we can do a little group learning, and we can move into this next season of our life with some of the gifts that God wants to give to us. So take a moment, process. We'll kind of bring it back together as a group. If you're here in this room with me, this is a part where I need your help. We're dialoguing, so it's not just me talking. We'll kind of share some of these ideas. I won't write everything down. I tried to put the whiteboard here so that maybe if you're watching online, you would see. I looked at it. It's kind of hard to see. Sorry. We're trying. But what I'm going to do is I would love to just kind of reflect on some of these things. And if you'll be willing to shout them out, I'll kind of reiterate some of them so that people who are watching through the feed as well can be a part of the conversation and kind of hear what's coming up. So let's maybe just start with this can be anything, that, like whatever our observations are. What are some observations that you noticed over the last several months, just in regards to this kind of interesting season that we've been in? Any interesting observations? Things you've noticed? Anything that's caught you off guard, or you didn't see coming, or you were just intrigued or interested by? It's okay. The struggles are okay. This is great. Actually, all of you wrote stuff down, so I know you have stuff. But even if this is kind of like a process, where you're like, man, I don't know, nothing. That would just re-emphasize the desire for us to build this spiritual muscle, because this is something I hope we'll do for the rest of our lives. Something that I was thinking about earlier is, we're kind of like plants. It sounds kind of weird, right? But there's sowing, and there's watering, and there's waiting for time to grow, and then there's the harvest. And I think through these seasons, God plants lessons and things within us, and then this time of reflection is like the time of watering. We're watering those things and allowing it to grow. And then by the end of this, we will harvest some of those things and take it with us into the next season. So what are we thinking? How much we take being with our friends for granted? Yeah, and in what ways did you notice that in yourself? Hmm. Yeah, just missing friends. That's a good one, man. Missing people. We see people every single day most of the time, especially if you go to school, and a lot of the introverts are like, I don't want to see anyone today. And then over time, it's like, oh man, even I need people. Yeah, no, it's great. And you mentioned an appreciation for it even now on the other side of it. Any other observations, thoughts, things that caught you off guard? See. Oh. Trying new things because you're bored? Care to share anything new that you tried? Learning how to cook. Yes. I like food so much. My stomach just growled because it was like, hey, man, I love food. Yeah. People baking bread from scratch, like churning butter, like people picking up like pilgrim hobbies. Anyways, I love it. New things, new hobbies, exploring, trying new things, just to keep yourself entertained in the midst of the slowness and the time. That's great. What about? Okay, I'll shift gears, but we can always reflect on it. What about what were some things, if you've thought about this, that you realize we could accomplish digitally? Because we talk all the time about man, we need to be in person, we need to be the church, don't be isolated, don't be alone. Was there anything that you're like, wow, this actually works digitally? Maybe you thought it would, or you didn't know it would, but you saw that. If you're online, speak up. Just kidding, it doesn't work. I'll say I noticed how much community could happen online. I know the value of being in person, but as soon as we couldn't gather, I was FaceTiming people more than I had before. I was calling people more, and I was connecting with more people than I had prior to this. And I was like, man, it's a lot easier to connect with people quickly than I thought it was. So in that way, I was like, this is really cool. I kind of learned something new through that I thought was really cool. I don't know if anyone else realized that. Even through our Zoom calls, but our FaceTimes and just different things like that, I learned something new about technology. Our ability to do the messages that we've had and have it in different homes, and people are watching that never would be watching our stuff before and engaging with it. That was really cool. So it made me see even how we engage with people in conversations online differently, which is something I had never done before this. So that was something that was kind of interesting to me through this season.
For some people, it's easier to share with others to protect them.
Yeah. Being able to invite a friend to church online, and they don't have to walk through the building and be all nervous. They can watch right in their living room or their bedroom. That's really cool. Thinking about invitation different, only in person. You see, school. Digital just wasn't cutting it. Yeah, online classes. Some were all right, some were probably, yeah, online classes. Yes. Outfits. Sweatpants all day, every day? No, pajamas, wearing the same. Yeah, you want some diversity. I know. Does your fashion changes when you're at home every day, doesn't it? You're like, I used to love that jacket. Now I have no reason for a jacket at home. What things did you just realize, man, could only happen in person, or like digital wasn't cutting it? It couldn't accomplish it. Hugs. The hugs. I forgot I was supposed to be writing stuff. Hugs. Hugs. Hugs, not drugs. That'll preach. Hugs, not drugs. Yeah, man. You got another one? Mm. Yeah, easy person conversation. This is definitely an in-person one. Anything else in regards to in-person? I'll say like we've kind of said, how much relationship is in person. Like, I'm sitting on a Zoom call with a bunch of my friends, and I'm just like, this is so different than even if we were just sitting on the couch not talking. There's something about in person that is just so life-giving that just doesn't happen through YouTube, through a Zoom call, through Google Chat. Yeah. Good. Okay. What about benefits of the alone time? Benefits. What good things came from the slowing down, the aloneness? Reading. Okay. Others, shout them out. Let me hear you. You don't have to wait for me to call on you.
I learned how to bake bread.
You learned how to bake bread, man. Baking bread. Mm. Solitude, some self-learning. For those of you watching through the stream, AP was saying, man, instead of just bouncing ideas off of other people, you kind of had to bounce them off yourself. You had to process through them and wrestle through them on your own. And so the solitude allowed for some more self-learning. I would use the word introspection. You kind of start digging into some of the things that maybe you don't normally. Like, I know when I'm hanging out with friends, it's just go, 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 go. And then I'm on my own, and suddenly, like, it's all these thoughts come to life. And so if we're always moving, we actually don't give space for those things. And I believe the Holy Spirit speaks in those moments that are really, really. Yeah. Yeah, so again, it comes back to, I'm sorry for those watching, it's like there's these dead spots where you can't hear the conversation, but the time and the solitude and let's call it reflection. The reflection allows for some healing and working through some things that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise, or processing things in a different way because you're doing so on your own. That's really great. Would anyone, it doesn't have to be like super personal, but what maybe challenges or obstacles or difficulties, or is there anything unhealthy that surfaced from just like being on your own all the time? Getting in your own head? Yeah, I can see that. So the benefit of the quiet time is you get to get in your own head. And then the challenge can be you get in your own head. overthinking, or, I won't write this, but unhealthy thinking or deceptive thinking. We can fool ourselves, or we can go down negative thought paths and spirals that aren't true, but because there's no one there to correct us or to speak into it, we just go. We just go down that path. Yeah, another one.
Getting comfortable in like not seeing people or just like in my own home and like, no, I don't want to go out. I'm just gonna stay home.
Getting comfortable not stepping out. You just hunker down, become a homebody, don't actually go out into the world. Yeah, great. Anyone notice family challenges? No? Everything's been great? Yeah, notice some extra tension in the home? Getting on each other's nerves a little quicker? Isn't that crazy? Isn't that amazing? And we're like, I just want to get away, or go outside, or be gone. Yeah. I'm touching that. Are you raising a hand? Okay, I saw your hand. Yeah. So relational tensions. I know it is to be around the same people for a long time too, and you just start getting on each other's nerves a little bit, and you're like, why does this person exist? And then you're like, check my heart. That's not good. Yeah, no, relational tensions. So, okay, with this, right? I just want to get us to start thinking about the different things we can observe, the good things, the bad things, the challenges, the opportunities. I felt like I saw opportunities in the fact that everyone's world was shaken up in a way that they didn't expect, and they became more open to different conversations than they had ever been before. I was having conversations with people about life and faith and what matters most and what is true and what's not true with people I wouldn't have had these conversations with before. Why? Because they were attached to the patterns and the normal rhythms that we were a part of, and as soon as those were broken and they didn't know where to go, it's like you got to the end of the railroad tracks and you didn't know where else to go. It was like they began to look for hope, and they began to look for something different, and the gospel was able to step into that position. We were able to have conversations that led people closer to Jesus that I just wouldn't have had before. As a church, we've seen the number of people come to faith since we've gone online drastically go up. We are on track to just supersede and surpass our expectations and our hopes for the number of people we would see coming to Jesus this year. This season has been used by God to bring people closer to Him, and it's been really, really cool just through that. But through this reflection, I will just tell you, again, some of the things that I learned, and you've shared some of these, but the way God will use interruptions in our lives to draw other people towards Him. God really rocked me in the early, middle, beginning part of this season in showing me that I had attached parts of my identity to things other than Him that I just wouldn't have realized. Parts of my identity attached to my vocation, what I do, I've attached my identity in some way to relationships that I have and friendships, the people around me, right? When I wasn't around them, or when I wasn't able to do my work the way that I normally did, when I wasn't able to go about my normal routine, in some ways I just felt like things were falling apart, and that wouldn't have it pointed out areas that I attached my hope or my identity to things other than Him. If I'm rocked by changes in the world, it shows that I've grabbed onto something other than Jesus. That was really telling for me. That's probably one of the most valuable things that came out of the early season of this for me, is like, whoa, I did not realize how much I attached my identity to other people. I didn't know how much of my identity was attached to my social group or just to my vocation. I don't know what I'm doing in this COVID season. Everything's crazy. How much does that rock my sense of self and who I am? These are lessons that I learned in this. You love doing things with people, and suddenly when we couldn't, like you said, Tegan, is suddenly it's like, man, you cherish the time you can have with people. You appreciate that. I didn't know a hug was until we weren't able to do it anymore, right? You just want to hug people. You just want to high five them. You just want to give them a fist bump. So I started learning the value of our social relationships. And I don't know if anyone's like me. You learn the dangers maybe of social isolation. We talked about anxieties. Maybe your anxieties, your worries, your insecurities spiral or spike in the midst of being alone. And and you'd realize just how much you've attached yourself to other people, or just not doing okay in solitude. I always ask myself, if I'm in solitude and I'm not doing okay, why? Because I should be able to be alone and be okay. Because alone with Jesus and in relationship with him. So maybe you process and you reflect really quickly and you wrote a lot of things down. Maybe you're a little slower at processing and you need time to just roll through it a little bit more. I would encourage you to do that at home and on your own, and to take more time to just reflect on the season. How have you responded? How have you reacted? What is your reaction towards your siblings and your parents in the midst of this? Say about our own heart. Right? I think I talked about that relational tension and the things that bubble to the surface. God will use that as moments to show us parts of our hearts that just aren't quite surrendered and submitted to him yet. Love as I have loved you, right? Be patient, enduring all things with those, blessing and serving and caring for. And you start to realize, man, not to feel guilty about ways that I fall short, but to see it as an opportunity that there's a lesson in this moment, that I see something I wouldn't have seen before, that now I can bring to Jesus and I can pray to him about, and I can ask him to work on and to break in on. There is a sanctification and a growing more and more like Jesus that can happen through our reflection. And so what I hope to do through this is just kind of, if you've never done it before, we just kind of did a little bit of reflection. I talked about daily reflection, weekly reflection, seasonal reflection at the end of different chapters and before the beginning of new ones. And then I would just ask you, and maybe we'll take a moment to just ponder this, but with your observations, what are you going to do with this? What are you going to do with this new understanding or this new perception, or the things you've noticed, the things that God has kind of poked at and revealed? Maybe some of them are on your paper. What are you going to do with it? Are you just going to go, that's interesting, and go and move on? Or are you going to ponder it? Or are you going to reflect on it, bring it to Jesus, and allow him to do something? Because I would petition that if we don't pause, if we don't reflect, if we don't look back, if we don't work through some of the unhealthiness or the things that need healing, or the aspects of our heart that aren't submitted to Jesus, we will miss a lot of the lessons and the things he desired to produce in us, the fruit that he desires to produce in you as disciples of his. So how are you going to allow this time of reflection, thinking back, pondering, to draw you nearer to God? Will you use this time of reflection to actually move closer to Jesus, to grow in your trust, or to bring something to him that you haven't brought to him before? Maybe this season has caused you to ask some new questions, some more soul searching. Maybe in that way you've kind of wrestled through some stuff, and you're in this next season, going into this next season, you have new questions to bring to Jesus, new ways to grow with him. That is awesome. That's the desire of my heart. That's the desire of God's heart for you, is that we would take a next step. Does that make sense? Is that new to anyone? Is this a habit that you haven't exercised, a spiritual discipline that you haven't utilized? Is it something that maybe you could say, man, I should do this at the end of every day in some way, just a little bit. Maybe go for a walk and ponder at the end of every week, at the end of every season. So here's what I want to do, and I'll wrap us up. I'm going to take 2 minutes to be still, to be silent. We can play a little bit of music underneath this, but to just be still and to ask ourselves, what are we going to do with this processing, and how is it going to draw us nearer to Jesus? How will it draw you closer to him?